Dodge is retiring their current muscle car lineup in preparation for the new electric Charger Daytona SRT, but that doesn't mean they're going quietly. Dodge has decided to go out with a bang and has released 7 last call special edition models, each with their own flair and personality and all of the rumbly performance V8 action that one could ask for.
Today's video is sponsored by Land Air Sea. Keep tabs on all your valuable assets from the palm of your hand. Remember, with Land Air Sea, theft is temporary. Visit landairSea.com to order your Land Air Sea GPS unit for your classic vehicle.
So this is the 2023 Dodge Challenger Shakedown, and it comes as the first of the last call cars from Dodge. The Shakedown is inspired by a 1971 Dodge Challenger built by Dodge and unveiled in 2016, which featured modern drivetrain components with this iconic look. Now, the 2023 Dodge Challenger Shakedown will be limited to just 1,000 units and will be produced in 2 different variations. The first 500 cars will be finished in Destroyer Gray and will be Dodge Challenger Scat Packs. The other 500 will be Dodge Challenger Scat Pack wide bodies finished in pitch black, just like the car we have with us today. Now, our 2023 Dodge Challenger Shakedown will set you back over $67,000, not including any additional costs. But today we're going to be showing you what all that includes, starting with the exterior, then we'll take a look at the powertrain, we'll take a look in the interior, and then of course, we'll take it for a drive. So, starting with the exterior, the look is perhaps some of the most iconic things for most of these cars, with a lot of them carrying over the same performance with the exception of the Demon 170. Starting with the look, this looks just like the car, the 1971 Challenger that would have been unveiled in 2016. Our car is finished in pitch black, and then we have these stripes, which of course were taken directly off of the car that we saw unveiled in 2016. It would be the most defining feature of this car. Just like the other Challenger, we do have a shaker, and then because Dodge wanted to keep a dark theme with this, we do have some extra badge changes as well throughout the car to sort of keep the theme going. Next to that shaker, we have some black hood pins, and then below that are our Challenger and RT badge that sit in the grille. So the Challenger badge has been darkened, but so has the RT badge, which I believe is actually specific to the Shakedown. Next to that, we have our cold air intake headlights, which we'll talk more about later, and then we do have some other Scat bag bits like this splitter and other things that are available. As we walk around to the side of the car, we have our big old wide body fenders, which again, only 500 of all Shakedowns will be equipped with the wide body. The other 500 will be gray with no wide body. These were first introduced for the RT in around 2022 and are about $6,000 by themselves as an option for the Challenger. Next to that, we do have these awesome satin black wheels. Now, these wheels are carbon black even, I should say, are of course to keep that theme going and cover those massive 14.2-inch 6-piston Brembo brakes and then 4-piston Brembo brakes in the rear. So that'll help you come to a stop, because this is a fairly heavy car coming in at around 4,300 pounds, which we'll bring that more up later. As we continue going down the side of the car, there's nothing too crazy here that differentiates from the normal Challenger models. Again, sort of our standard look that we saw in the front there with our vintage style fuel cap. As we come around to the rear, which is a good amount of length there, that's about 16.5 feet from the front to the rear of this Dodge Challenger, we have our first sign that this is actually a Shakedown. We have a Shakedown sticker that sits here on our rear spoiler, and that'll let us know that this is in fact the Shakedown on one of the last call cars, but no actual last call references aside from that, but there will be more to show later. Now, with that 16.5 feet, there are some added benefits. What happens is, if you go ahead and decide to take a look in the back here, you get a trunk that can hold so many bodies, a hearse would be jealous. So there's a lot of space advantages that come with that, despite the fact that this is a 2-door car that is larger than a lot of 4-door sedans. If we go ahead and put that down, we also have some nice Dodge badging, which is kind of a nice vintage touch. You'll only see it on the hood in the Black Ghost model as well. So that's a cool look at the exterior of our Dodge Challenger Shakedown. Now it's time to go ahead and pop the hood and take a look at what's going on for the powertrain. So under the hood here is a 6.4 liter V8 engine, or more specifically an SRT Hemi MDS engine. Now what that MDS means is that means we have the fuel saver equipped on this particular engine. Now in order to get the fuel saving mode, you do have to get that 8-speed torque flight automatic transmission, which of course can be manually shifted or used with paddle shifters, which is a fantastic transmission on its own if you didn't want to purchase the manual, but you have to choose whether you prefer to have that fuel saver option, which shuts off half of the cylinders in an effort to save more fuel, which is important when you have a big thirsty engine like this, or if you want that manual feel. Now on top of that, this engine produces 485 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. Combined with that 4,300 weight, what you can expect is a 0 to 60 of around 4.3 seconds. Your experience may vary a little bit based on that. A top speed of 174 miles per hour. So yes, this thing will really move. Now as far as an economy point of view, this thing gets about 15 city and 24 highways, what it's rated for. During our time with the car here in Phoenix, I found that I was able to get around 17.5 on average, which is pretty good, all things considered. Now, on top of that, this has a 16.5 gallon tank, so you can expect around 290 miles of range, and the lower end of that being around 270 if you were closer to that 15. And I do want to point out that that's not getting your foot onto it too much, but that's also not driving it like a Prius, because obviously you want to enjoy your big rumbly muscle car. So this is just by enjoying it a little bit, and you can definitely get better than 17.5 if you tried. I'm just telling you what we got by enjoying ourselves and driving it, maybe a little bit more spiritedly, admittedly, but it's pretty fun. So with that, what we're looking at in the engine bay here is we do have our shaker that sits on top, but obviously this is separated from the hood. It's not on top of the hood, it is on top of the engine, and it does not appear to be functional, but we do have our big cold air intake next to it, which sits just behind the driver's side cold air intake. Now, unfortunately, our cold air intake is actually blocked by a panel, and so what you'd have to do is unscrew that, and then your cold air intake would actually let air through. And there is a $40 part available from Dodge on the Direct Connection website that'll allow it to hook directly up to your cold air intake, and then the airflow is directed straight through the cold air headlight into your intake, and therefore you get more cool power and can sort of keep your operating temps and everything fairly cool. Now, some other cool details, we actually have a shaker sticker. That's not obvious when the hood is down, but when it's up, it sits just behind where the shaker would normally fill in the hole, and we actually have our last call badge. So right here on the front, we do have a Dodge Challenger last call badge. It tells us it was designed in Auburn Hills, Michigan, and assembled in Brampton, Ontario. Now, the weird part about that is it sits on this little flimsy plastic panel, which is actually fairly removable. So it's not really in a rigid place on the car, which would have been nice to see, just to make sure you have that sort of security, because who knows what people are going to be looking for and expectations. Who knows what could happen with these cars when people want proof that it is what it is. But hey, at least you get some sort of plaque that does sort of commemorate the special edition cars and the last call cars, just to make them stand out a little bit more than the other cars. So now that we've taken a look at that, it's time to put this hood down, put our hood pins back in, and see what's going on in the interior. So now we're on the interior of our Challenger Shakedown, and the first thing you'll notice is how everything feels very driver-centric. It's all sort of directed at the driver, and on top of that, you'll notice where a lot of the weight comes from. There are a lot of premium feeling materials in here, and this is a fully loaded car, so we have a lot of really cool materials at that. In addition to that, we also have our second and only other Shakedown badge on the entire car, and that sits on the passenger side next to the vent, and that is a sort of plastic feeling badge, which would have been nice to see in the rear as well, but I'll settle for a sticker if that's all we get there. Now, moving on, because this is a fully loaded car, this is equipped with the carbon and suede package. So what that means is we have carbon all over the front of the dash, we have it in our center console, and then we have suede in the roof and even suede in the seats. And then throughout that, we have a leather wrapped steering wheel along with some other leather looking components and some really comfortable armrests over here in the door that I really appreciate, because that means this car is going to be even more comfortable when you take it for long drives. Now, getting into perhaps some of the most important details of this car is because it is a Scat Pack model, that means we get access to the SRT dashboard and performance pages. Now, what that does is that means you get all of your super cool, fun-having party tools. That includes things like line lock, launch control, and you get to adjust all of your suspension bits, including the steering adjustment, which I'll talk more about in the driving portion, and just all of your performance goodies. In front of you, you have some 2 analog gauges that are very vintage style, which is a nice touch. Obviously, with how the Challenger looks so retro themed, carrying that over into the interior is also a very nice touch. You also get a multi-informational display in the middle that lets you check things like your economy, or you can just use it as a speedo, radio, whatever information you sort of want to look at. That is all generally available in there as well. One of the cool things is that in some of these center console buttons, we get our drive mode buttons, launch control even, that allows easy access, even turning traction control off. So Dodge knows that the way these vehicles are built, essentially, if you had an empty parking lot and somebody said you could have the keys to any vehicles you want, you would take any of the Mopars. All of these muscle cars are equipped with just fun having party tools, and Dodge wanted to make sure that you have easy access to all of them, including having their own separate buttons in addition to being able to manage everything through the touchscreen. Now, because you also need to be able to enjoy this car when you're not at the track and not using all of those awesome modes, we also have heated and ventilated seats. The steering wheel is also heated, along with a lot of your sort of normal standard amenities and buttons, seat memories, all those types of things, all the power controls that are in here. And this is a fairly sizable cabin too. You'd be surprised by how much just space you have in here, along with all of the adjustability, allows you to get a lot out of it. Now, moving on to the steering wheel here. Now, this is a fairly comfortable steering wheel. We have some perforated sections on here as well. The weird thing about, to me, that these cars have always been is these little like sort of half paddle shifters. Makes it a little bit interesting when you want to use them for your 8-speed automatic transmission. But then the reason for that is because they have these other buttons that sit behind. So while a lot of manufacturers will actually put the volume controls on the front, that's not the case here. A lot of the volume and managing some of your different screens and stuff all sits on the back, and then the front buttons are reserved for cruise control, some of your voice activated stuff, phone calls, and then you do have a menu that is for managing your other systems, not so much managing what's going on right in front of you. But that's a little bit of the setup there. Fairly standard. This stuff hasn't changed too much throughout the production with the facelift of these cars. Now, the last things I want to talk about is just sort of your view of looking out. You get that massive shaker, and that is just fantastic. And you even get the shaker on startup, which shows up in the little multi-informational display, which is just a little nice touch to make you feel better about that purchase, because this car is over $67,000. Now, as far as the back seat goes, it is a fairly sizable back seat because this is a fairly sizable car. Now, you could definitely put adults back there. I wouldn't recommend it for long trips. It would definitely work for kids, but it's best suited for grocery bags ultimately because it's not intended to have a ton of legroom. Lastly, one of the other best features about the car is the fact that we have the Harman Kardon sound system that actually comes with a subwoofer. So what that means is when you actually turn the bass up in your audio controls, you get bass. Now, you can't ask for anything better than that. This car pretty much comes with everything that you could ask for, anything that you would think about even potentially modifying it. It's already wide body, comes with a subwoofer, and it's fast. So there's not much more you could do to this car. So the premium makes sense because it's coming with everything that you could need. Now, that's enough about taking a look at this beautiful interior that fits the dark themes with the red stitching that we get on the exterior of our Shakedown. And now I think it's time we take it for a drive. So with that, because it's fairly hot out here, we're going to turn up some of our climate controls, and we're going to make sure that we have both our cooled seats going for the cameraman Dustin and I. So let's go ahead and get that going, and then let's start taking this thing for a drive. Let's get this thing on the road. So one of the cool things that comes with the Scat Pack, and it's obviously adjustable performance options, is the fact that you can actually adjust everything. So one of the things that you can adjust is the actual steering feel of the car. So you can leave it in street if you want something that has a little bit of a heavier power steering feel to it, or if you wanted to train that up a bit, let's say make it more resistant for when you're on the track, you can do that, put it in track mode, steering wheel gets much heavier, and that'll allow you to get more precise driving out of your Challenger. Now, on top of that, this is a fairly large car. So sitting here in the driver's seat, I can see the front of the hood pins that I talked about earlier are black hood pins. I can see the driver's side. I can't actually see the passenger side hood pins, so it feels like it's on the opposite side of the car. So that kind of gives you a proportion to how big this car actually is, because you can't even see all the way over there. But what I will say, what looks really good, is the shaker. That thing just looks awesome. It makes you feel like you're driving a muscle car. So in terms of aesthetic appeal from just sitting in the driver's seat with the interior facing you and how good the exterior of the car looks, you get nothing but brownie points for this car, and it looks amazing. And of course, you have that audible from our big rumbly 6.4 liter V8 that's making 485 horsepower. So certainly sounds great as far as an experience goes and the general immersion that you get from your muscle car. On top of that, the seats are pretty comfortable. They are bucket seats, so this is definitely going to be one of those vehicles that you're going to get in and test. Make sure you fit, because not all bucket seats are created equal, and some will fit better than others depending on your sort of body shape in the car and what sort of position they're looking for, but they do have the various back support as well. Now, with all of the driver assists on, this is a fairly controllable vehicle. You won't have any awkward moments where the car surprises you unless you're really getting on it and, you know, applying gas in the middle of a turn. However, the minute you start taking off some of the driver assists, especially traction control, you'll find that this car will spin tires. And so you have to be cautious when you use that. Dodge will generally recommend using those modes for sport or track use only, and not to be using those modes on the street, because bad things can happen and you don't want to be the guy that's on the news because you drove your Scat Pack too hard into a curb, because you can definitely do that with this car. That rear end will come out faster than you think it will, but that means it's lots of fun to be had when you take it to the track. Now, we're about to get on the freeway here, so I'll be able to give you guys a little bit of a pull, and you can listen to what that 6.4 liter V8 sounds like from the inside. All right. Oh yeah, and this thing picks up insanely fast. You'd have a hard time driving this hard, especially in the city, if you wanted to drive spiritedly, because you would reach the speed limits so quickly that you have to sort of watch yourself. You don't want to get speeding tickets while driving this car, but it is insanely fast for what it is, and it'll obviously move a lot as well. You have no shortage of space. It's a perfect daily driver, I would say, even for that reason, and it's a car that you can just generally enjoy. And between a mix of both freeway driving like we're doing now and our city driving, like I mentioned earlier, we managed to get 17.5 miles per gallon, and that was getting on it like that to enjoy it. So you can expect, I would say, that, if give or take, depending on your driving style, if you're an aggressive driver, and you know you are, then obviously expect that to be a little worse. But the bottom is 15 for what is recommended by the EPA. So it's a pretty cool car at that. Now, some of the downsides is, in order to get that cool fastback silhouette that's reminiscent of the original 1970 Dodge Challenger, what you get are these big buttresses on the rear, and those can be a little bit of a blind spot. I will say, admittedly, sometimes when you're backing out of a parking spot, or even just trying to check your blind spot yourself, it's not bad on the driver's side, but when you're looking at the passenger side, it could be a little dodgy to actually check that. But you can, of course, use your mirrors, and you do have blind spot monitoring in the car as well. But if you like to visually check that yourself, it's a little harder to do in this car for that rear blind spot. That being said, I haven't run into any issues while driving the car, and if you're ever worried about it, you can always back the car in as well when you're parking it, and then you'll never have to worry about checking that blind spot when you're going out, or you can just take a look at your camera. Now, that's pretty much it as far as the driving for one of these cars goes. They're fairly straightforward. They've been around for a while. You've been able to go in to any of the auctions, including our parent company, Barrett-Jackson, and hop in one for a thrill ride if you wanted to feel the full potential of what you can get out of one of these performance automobiles. Now, with that, Dodge is starting to head into their last special edition cars, making the announcement for their next generation of muscle cars. If you are interested in purchasing one of these, because what these are essentially fully loaded versions of existing cars, with the exception of the Dodge Demon 170, you can expect them to be very similar with special collector edition options, because they are all limited edition. We ultimately suggest that you go to a dealership and check out the cars yourself if you're interested, because we can tell you what we think, but you got to make sure it's the right fit for you as well in the end. But with that, if you guys enjoyed this video, could hit that like button for us. We'd really appreciate it. Feel free to throw a comment below if you've had an experience with any of these cars, not just the Last Call cars, or if you plan on purchasing one of the Last Call cars, because they have a lot of different cool themes that I think are a great way to really send off the cars and highlight all of Dodge's heritage. And with that, of course, you can get subscribed too. We'd really appreciate it, so you don't miss more content like this in the future. And with that, thank you so much for watching.